Have you ever truly wondered what it would feel like, not in a history book, not in a video game, but in your own skin, to wake up as a medieval peasant? Before we dive into this dark and muddy world, take just a moment, hit the like button, share where you are listening from, and subscribe if you are hungry for more stories that peel back the layers of history. Only if you are ready, of course. Because tonight we are stepping into a life that few would envy, and fewer would survive. Now imagine this. The year is 1325. Dawn does not break with the sound of birds singing sweetly outside your window. It begins with the sharp sting of cold air against your skin as you roll off a pile of straw. The straw is damp, scratchy, and alive with fleas. Your back aches, not from last night's exercise class or a long drive, but from endless days of bending, hauling, and scraping at the soil with primitive tools. You can't remember the last time you woke up without pain. You stretch and your stomach growls angrily, reminding you that dinner last night was nothing more than a thin porridge. Barley boiled with water, no salt, no spice, nothing but the faint taste of survival. The air in your hut smells of smoke, manure, and unwashed bodies. There is no privacy here. Your children, your spouse, maybe even your aging parents are all crammed together in a single room, huddled against the draft that seeps through the cracks in the walls. The roof above you is thatched, which means every rainstorm turns into a guessing game. Will the roof hold, or will you spend the night shivering, soaked to the bone, listening to your children cough? Outside, the mud never really dries. Chickens peck at the dirt floor of your hut. Pigs snort and shuffle just outside the door, and sometimes inside it too, because animals are wealth and wealth must be guarded. You do not own a lock, and you do not need one. What thief would waste his time stealing from a peasant? The bell of the church tolls in the distance, heavy and relentless. It does not invite you. It commands you. The church is not just a building. It is the rhythm of your life, the keeper of your soul, and a constant reminder that your body may belong to your Lord, but your soul belongs to God, or so they tell you. You cross yourself partly out of faith, partly out of habit, and partly out of fear. Because in your world, sin is not an abstract concept. Sin is the difference between eternal fire and a fleeting chance at heaven. And yet, for all this, there is no choice. You cannot decide to change your career, move to a new town, or start a side hustle online. You were born into this mud, and this mud will likely swallow you whole. The land is not yours. It belongs to your Lord, a man you may never speak to, but whose demands you feel every day in the sweat on your brow and the calluses on your hands. You owe him taxes, labor, and loyalty. You owe the church tithes, prayers, and obedience. And what do you get in return? Protection, they say. Protection from raiders, from bandits, from neighboring lords. But sometimes those very protectors are the ones you fear most. Life is short, cruel, and endlessly repetitive. But here's the strange thing, it is not all darkness. Sometimes you hear laughter carried on the wind from the village square. Sometimes, after a long day, you share ale with neighbors and laugh at a joke so crude and silly that you forget your hunger for a moment. Sometimes a child's smile reminds you that life has beauty, even in the mud. Those moments are fleeting, fragile, but they are real. Still, when night falls, and the fire burns low, and shadows crawl across the thatch above you, the questions gnaw at your mind. What if tomorrow brings famine? What if the soldiers march through again, demanding food you do not have? What if sickness spreads and there is no cure but prayer and superstition? You lie awake, knowing tomorrow will be just as hard as today, with no promise of relief. So, as you sink deeper into your pillow tonight, safe in your modern bed, imagine slipping into the skin of that medieval peasant. Feel the mud between your toes, the sting of cold rain on your face, the itch of fleas burrowing into your clothes. Smell the smoke of the hearth mixed with the sour stench of manure. Hear the church bell commanding your soul, the rooster crowing at dawn, the endless cough of your neighbors, and ask yourself the question that will guide us through this entire story. If you woke up tomorrow in that world, would you endure? Or would you break? Picture yourself stepping outside your hut at first light. The ground is soft, not because it rained last night, but because the village path is always mud. It clings to your ankles, heavy and cold, and by the time you reach the field, your feet are already numb. The horizon glows faintly pink, but the beauty is lost on you, because beauty does not put bread on the table. Your tools are simple, a wooden plow, maybe a rusted iron blade if your lord allowed it, and the sheer strength of your back. Oxen groan beside you, slow and stubborn, but stronger than any man. You push, you pull, you sweat. The earth resists. Every inch of soil is a battle, and every furrow you carve feels like a wound in your body. The work does not end when the sun climbs high. In fact, the harder it burns, the harder you labor. Sweat trickles down your face, mixing with the dirt until your skin feels like clay. You wipe your brow, but your hands are rough, cracked, and blackened. The lines on your palms look like maps of suffering, and each callus tells a story of yesterday's toil. And here's the cruelest truth. No matter how much you work, the harvest never truly belongs to you. Half of it will be demanded by your Lord, another tenth by the church, and what remains may not be enough to keep your family alive through winter. Imagine working from dawn until dusk, breaking your back over land that is not yours, only to hand the fruits of your labor to men who have never touched a plow. Sometimes, while you bend low to the earth, you dream. You dream of fields that belong to you, of freedom to sell your own grain, of eating bread until your belly is full. But those are dangerous dreams. A peasant who dares to want more can find himself beaten, fined, or worse. Ambition in your world is a crime. And yet, there is no escape. You cannot quit. You cannot pack your family and move to another Lord's land. Your life is tied to the soil like roots that cannot be dug out. When the oxen grow weary, you pick up the slack. When tools break, you mend them with scraps. When your body begs for rest, you grit your teeth and keep going. Because if you stop, the land does not forgive. Crops will fail, hunger will grow, and hunger is a harsher master than any lord. The sun dips low, and still you toil. Your back bends, your knees ache, your vision blurs with exhaustion. Children run in the distance, not at play, but carrying water, chasing away birds, or gathering kindling. Even they are part of this endless machine. Childhood is short when survival demands small hands and strong wills. By the time you return to your hut, the mud has dried in thick crusts on your legs. Your shirt is soaked with sweat, stiff with grime, and your muscles tremble like they no longer belong to you. You drop onto the straw bed with a groan that echoes the groans of 1,000 peasants before you. Tomorrow will be the same. The next day, too, and the one after that. Now ask yourself, would you survive such monotony, such grinding labor, knowing that the reward is never yours to keep? Would you find the strength to rise each dawn, or would the mud of the field slowly bury your will, grain by grain, until you were nothing but another forgotten name in the soil? The sweat on your brow has hardly dried when another burden arrives, one that no plow, no ox, and no prayer can lighten. It is the weight of obligation, the endless duties owed to men you may never meet face to face. For you are not free. You are a tenant, a servant, a cog in a machine built to enrich others. Imagine this. After months of backbreaking work, the grain finally ripens. Golden fields sway in the wind, promising relief, promising bread, promising maybe even a moment of joy. But the harvest is not yours to celebrate. Your Lord's men arrive, their boots clean, their tunics bright, their hands soft. They do not ask politely. They take. Cart after cart of grain rolls toward the manor, and with each sack lifted from your field, your family's winter grows thinner. What remains is measured, weighed, and taxed again. The church demands its tithe, a tenth of everything you produce. Sometimes they want grain, sometimes eggs, sometimes even a goose for the feast days. You kneel, you hand it over, and you hope that God is more merciful than his servants. And still, it does not end there. Your obligations go beyond taxes. Your Lord may summon you for corvée labor, forced work on his roads, his bridges, his castle walls. Imagine toiling for weeks, building fortifications that will never protect you, only him. Your hands blister, your back screams, and when you finally return to your own hut, your fields are overgrown, your family hungry. If there is a wedding at the manor, you are expected to contribute. If there is a funeral, you must pay a fee. If your Lord's son decides to take up arms and ride to war, you may be called to march at his side, or more truthfully, to die in his place. And if you cannot pay in grain or labor, there is always coin. But coin is rare, rarer than meat on your table. To gather enough, you might sell your only pig, or pawn the very tools you need to survive. You sometimes wonder, what if you refused, what if you said no, but refusal is not an option. A man who defies his Lord may find himself beaten, shackled, or cast out. Cast out in your world is worse than death. No land, no shelter, no neighbors to help, exile is a slow starvation. Better to hand over the grain and keep your place in the village, no matter how cruel. And the irony is bitter. You work, you sweat, you bleed, and yet you live in constant debt. A debt that is never truly paid. Each year begins with obligation and ends with the same. You tell yourself it is the natural order, that God himself decreed this hierarchy, that nobles rule, priests bless, and peasants endure. Perhaps you even believe it, because believing is easier than despair. Sometimes, though, you laugh, not out of joy, but out of sheer absurdity. A neighbor jokes that the Lord must have softer hands than his wife. Another whispers that priests must be hungry too, judging by the size of their bellies. Humor is a rebellion of its own, small and fleeting, but precious. Because without laughter, the weight would crush you entirely. And so the cycle turns. You rise before the sun, you labor until it sets, and you give away what little you have left. The Lord feasts in his hall, the priest prays in his church, and you collapse on your straw bed, knowing tomorrow will bring the same demands. Now pause here in your warm modern room. Think about the taxes you complain about today, the bills, the rent, the debts. Then imagine owing your body, your hours, your very breath to a man whose face you might never see. Could you endure such endless duties? Or would your spirit crumble beneath the crushing weight of obligations you could never escape? When the day's labor is finally done, you long for rest. But rest in your world is not comfort. It is simply the absence of work, and sometimes not even that. Imagine returning to your hut, shoulders aching, hands raw, stomach half empty. You step inside, expecting shelter, and what you find is little more than a wooden frame stuffed with straw. Your bed is not a mattress, not even a blanket spread upon a frame. It is a heap of straw piled in the corner of the room, pressed down by the weight of bodies night after night. The straw smells faintly sour, damp from the moisture of breath and sweat. It scratches your skin, pricks your arms, and never truly feels clean. And then the fleas. They are the true rulers of your bed. Tiny, relentless, they feast upon you as you sleep. Each bite itches, burns, and reminds you that comfort is a luxury for others, not for peasants. You scratch until your skin bleeds, but still they come. At times you joke with your neighbors, saying, "At least the fleas do not demand taxes." Laughter softens the sting, but only a little. Your hut itself offers little refuge. The walls are made of wattle and daub, sticks woven together and smeared with mud. Gaps let the cold wind slip through, and in winter the chill feels like knives pressing into your bones. Smoke from the hearth lingers, stinging your eyes, making every breath thick. The roof is thatched, fragile against storms and often home to birds, mice, or worse. Rain leaks through, dripping on your face as you try to sleep. Privacy is non-existent. Your entire family sleeps in the same space, sometimes even the animals. Chickens wander across the floor at night. A pig might grunt in the corner. Cows are tethered close by, their breath steaming in the dark. Their warmth is welcome in the bitter cold, but their smell is unavoidable. To you, this mingling of beasts and humans is normal. To a modern visitor, it would feel like chaos. And yet, somehow, you find moments of comfort. A child curls up beside you, their small body radiating warmth. A spouse hums a tune softly, a lullaby to drown out the wind. Exhaustion claims you, heavier than the straw beneath. Sleep comes, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Tomorrow's work will not wait for you to be ready. Still, the night is never peaceful. You dream of food, of warmth, of a soft bed that does not itch or bite. You wake in the dark to the sound of coughing, or to the squeak of mice, or to the sharp stab of a flea bite. You roll over, pressing deeper into the straw, as if burying yourself will bring relief. Now, pause for a moment. Look at your modern bed, the clean sheets, the soft pillow, the mattress that molds to your body. Think of the silence of your bedroom, the hum of distant traffic, maybe the purr of a pet at your feet. Would you trade it for straw, smoke, and fleas? Would you sleep soundly, knowing tomorrow would bring not rest, but another dawn of labor? You wake up hungry, and you go to bed hungry. Hunger is not an occasional inconvenience here. It is the rhythm of your existence. In the medieval world, food is never guaranteed. A bad harvest, a late frost, or a swarm of locusts can strip your village bare. And when the fields fail, so do the people. Imagine staring at a pot of thin porridge, barley or oats boiled in water, stretched so far that flavor is a forgotten luxury. Bread, when you have it, is coarse and heavy, often mixed with ground peas or even sawdust to make it last. Meat, perhaps on holy days, if you are lucky. Most days, the only thing on your plate is the gnawing ache in your stomach. The cruel irony is that you live surrounded by fields, yet those fields do not feed you freely. Grain goes first to the Lord, then to the church, and only then, if anything remains, to you. So you learn to survive on scraps. Wild herbs, mushrooms, berries, even weeds boiled into soup become part of your diet. Sometimes you boil bones until they dissolve, making a broth so thin it is more memory than meal. Hunger is not just physical, it gnaws at your mind. It makes you irritable, desperate, and willing to risk everything for a morsel. People steal, not out of greed but out of survival. A single loaf of bread might cost you your hand if you are caught. Imagine standing before a village crowd, shame burning in your chest, as punishment is dealt for nothing more than the crime of being hungry. Winter is the harshest master. The fields lie barren, the stores are empty, and the nights are long. Families huddle together, rationing the last scraps of grain. Children cry for food, their bellies bloated not from fullness but from starvation. You might chew leather, gnaw bark, or eat whatever vermin you can catch. In some chronicles, there are whispers of darker choices, when desperation pushed people beyond what we dare speak aloud. And yet, even in hunger, there are moments of grim humor. A neighbor might laugh that the only thing full in the village is the priest's belly. Another might joke that ale counts as food, after all. It fills you up and makes you forget your troubles for a little while. Ale, in fact, is the peasant's lifeline, not just for celebration, but because water itself is often unsafe to drink. Children sip weak ale from an early age, because a dull haze is safer than disease. But laughter does not fill your stomach. When famine strikes, whole villages wither. Fields go untended, people scatter in search of food, and the dead are buried shallow because there is no strength to dig. The church bell tolls more often, not for weddings or feasts, but for funerals. Now, imagine yourself there. Your pantry is empty, your children's faces gaunt. You hear rumors that in the next village, people are boiling nettles and grass. Do you stay, hoping the winter passes? Do you risk stealing from the Lord's granary, knowing the penalty could be death? Or do you leave everything behind, wandering roads haunted by bandits and wolves? Hunger is the true enemy of the peasant, one that never sleeps, never relents. It is a slow, patient killer, waiting at the edge of every season. And the cruelest thought of all is this: no matter how hard you labor, no matter how much you pray, hunger always finds its way back to your table. So I ask you, if the only thing waiting for you at the end of the day was an empty bowl, would you still find the strength to rise each morning? You think you know fear of hunger, of lords, of winter's bite, but nothing in your village inspires terror the way sickness does. It arrives without a trumpet or a banner. It creeps in the breath of a traveler, in the flea under a rat's fur, in the cough of a child. One day the lane is noisy with gossip and goats. The next doors are shut, smoke is thin, and the bell at the church tolls and tolls and tolls. You feel it first as a heaviness. The body goes leaden, the head grows hot, and the throat grips. A tender swelling blooms in the armpit, the groin, the neck, small at dawn, a painful stone by dusk. It burns. It throbs. You touch it and feel fire. Someone whispers the word no one wants to say, plague. No physician rides for peasants, not really. If one passes through, he speaks in the language of humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, declaring you out of balance. The cure: let the barber open a vein. Let the blood run into a bowl until your sight dims, and your ears ring like the church bell. If you are lucky, he is sober. If you are luckier, his knife is clean. If you are luckiest, the bleeding stops before your life does. Leeches are next, fat, glossy, patient. They latch, they drink, they fall, and you tell yourself the sickness is leaving with them. Poultices of herbs are pressed to the buboes. Honey, vinegar, crushed garlic, onion warmed in ash, a charm sewn into cloth and hung at the throat. A mother mutters a prayer over rosemary. A grandmother knots a ribbon in threes because threes feel holy. You breathe the smoke of juniper because someone swears it cleanses the air. Meanwhile, the priest arrives with relics and warnings. Confess now. Make peace. The world is a testing ground, and you are failing. He tells you sin has weight, that it drags the soul toward the pit, and that the pestilence knows a sinner's scent. You nod, trembling. You do not ask why the righteous cough blood. You are too busy breathing. The village fractures along invisible lines. Some shut their doors, shutter their windows, burn sweet herbs to perfume the stale air. Others flee for the road, taking sickness with them like a secret they cannot help but share. The bold or the desperate join whipping processions, lashing their backs bloody in the square, certain that pain will purchase mercy. Burials become hurried, shallow. The dead are carried on doors ripped from hinges. Lime dusts the earth like snow. Children stare with silent eyes that should be loud with mischief. A wife ties a ribbon around her husband's wrist to remember which hand once held hers. The carpenter stops measuring coffins and starts guessing. In the midst of this, life insists on itself in strange ways. A neighbor swears by a superstition of onions in socks. Another proposes a scientific improvement: put the onion in both socks. A third announces that ale kills bad air from the inside, and volunteers as the bravest healer in the parish. You laugh, then cough, and the laugh vanishes like steam. Do you seek a cure or a meaning? The mind claws for story when the world goes wordless. You remember old tales, a black dog seen at twilight, a comet smeared across the sky, a woman with nettle-stung hands who never falls ill. Is she favored? Is she cursed? You cannot help but look twice at the midwife, at the widow with bright eyes, at anyone whose garden grows too well. Fear makes patterns where none exist and then calls them truth. But under the candles and charms, something practical stirs. The baker stops sharing spoons. The miller posts a boy at the door to keep customers apart. The priest, despite thunderous sermons, leaves bread at thresholds rather than placing it in palms. The word quarantine is not on your tongue, yet your hands begin to learn it. You wash more. You keep distance. You survive by accident and by instinct. Nights are the worst. Fever climbs like ivy, winding around the mind. Shadows ripple. The thatch above you sways with wind and whispers. You dream of cool wells and wake to a mouth like chalk. Sometimes the swelling bursts and hot sour pus runs. It is disgusting, and also sometimes it is hope. The pain sharpens, then recedes. You fall into sleep heavy as stone and rise lighter. Other times the pain climbs stairs you cannot descend. Say you live. Say the bell stops tolling for your house. Say the swelling shrinks and your breath comes easier. You step outside into a village that is not the same village. The square is quieter. The jokes are thinner. The world feels tilted as if the sun rose from the wrong hedge. What do you carry out of the sickness? A scar in the armpit. A new habit of boiling ladles. A small secret pride that you endured when so many did not. And a question that does not let go: why you and not them? From your warm bed tonight, consider the gamble your ancestors played without choosing. Could you face a cough that might be a death sentence, a swelling that might mark you for the pit? Would you put faith in leeches and vinegar, prayers and distance, cutting and cauterizing, and the stubborn, ordinary wisdom of washing your hands? Or would you falter at the sound of the bell, feeling it toll inside your ribs? If hunger gnaws at your stomach and plague stalks your lungs, there is still another constant companion of the medieval peasant: the smell. It is not a detail. It is the air itself, woven into every breath. Imagine waking not to birdsong or coffee, but to the pungent perfume of manure, smoke, sweat, and rot, all mingling in the same breath. Your village does not have plumbing, drains, or even the idea of sanitation as you know it. Waste goes into pits, buckets, or simply the street. Chamber pots are emptied out the door, sometimes with a warning shout, sometimes not. Rain spreads it through the mud, and children splash in puddles that are more than rainwater. The smell rises and clings, especially in summer, when heat cooks it until it is thick enough to taste. Inside your hut, things are not much better. The hearth smolders day and night, filling the air with wood smoke that burns your throat. Damp straw molds in the corners, while the animals contribute their own fragrance. Chickens leave droppings, pigs track in filth, cows steam and sweat. You cannot escape it, not even in sleep. Bathing, that is a rare luxury. Perhaps once or twice a year, if the river is not frozen and you can spare the time. Soap is scarce, expensive, often made from lye that stings and strips. Most peasants settle for rinsing in cold water, or rubbing with sand and cloth. The idea of daily showers, of perfumed shampoo, would seem like sorcery. To them, water could even be dangerous. Too much bathing was thought to weaken the body, open the pores, let sickness in. Better to keep the dirt as a kind of armor. Your clothes do not help. They are wool, heavy and damp, rarely washed, and when they are, the water is rarely clean. Sweat, smoke, and mildew cling, no matter how often you air them out. A tunic worn in spring might smell the same in winter, only stronger. You might joke that your cloak has more personality than you do, because it announces you before you speak. Tooth care, forget it. Breath smells of decay, of onions, of whatever ale was last gulped. Teeth rot early, turning mouths into tiny graveyards. Children lose baby teeth and grow crooked adults. Adults lose them altogether. You choose soft food if you can find it. Otherwise, you gum your bread and swallow your pride. And yet people adapt. Your nose adjusts, learns to filter, learns to ignore. You laugh at the very idea that someone might faint from smell alone. A visiting noble might wrinkle his powdered nose at the scent of your village, but you shrug. It is life. If everything stinks, nothing stinks. Still, imagine yourself in that world. Step from your warm, clean shower into a medieval hut where steam rises not from lavender soap, but from a manure pile outside the door. Imagine sleeping in clothes that have not seen water in months, waking with your hair stiff with grease, your breath sour enough to curdle milk. Could you bear it? Could you laugh it off the way peasants did, joking that at least the fleas do not mind? For them, smell was not an intrusion, it was a reminder. A reminder of animals that gave milk, of fires that gave warmth, of fields that gave food, of life itself, raw and unpolished. You might cover your nose, but to them, it was simply the smell of survival. Step into your medieval wardrobe. Though calling it a wardrobe might be generous. There is no closet, no dresser, no tidy row of shirts. Your entire fashion collection could fit into a single sack, and most of it already smells of smoke and sweat. In truth, you own perhaps 2 tunics at most, one for everyday labor, and one slightly less filthy for church on Sundays. The fabric is wool, scratchy and heavy, woven thick for warmth but rarely comfortable. In summer, it soaks with sweat and clings to your body like a wet blanket. In winter, it holds dampness, refusing to dry fully by the hearth. Linen exists, softer and cooler, but it is expensive, a dream beyond your means. Instead, your skin grows accustomed to the constant itch of coarse wool against flesh. Your colors are not bold or bright. Forget crimson silks or emerald velvets, the palette of the peasant is mud, ash, and faded brown. Dyes are weak, often from plants boiled in makeshift pots. A tunic might start greenish but fade to a sad yellow-gray. A hood patched too many times becomes a quilt of colors, none of them flattering. You joke that your outfit is earth-toned because it is literally covered in earth. Shoes sometimes. If you are fortunate, you have leather boots, stiff and cracked, patched again and again until they resemble more patch than leather. More often, your shoes are bundles of cloth wrapped around your feet or sandals woven from straw. In the wet months, mud seeps through no matter what, and you go barefoot when the effort seems pointless. Your toes are calloused, tough as old wood and just as dirty. Headwear is practical. A coif of linen if you can afford it, a wool cap if you cannot. Sunburns, cold bites, and rain never truly stays out. Women wear kerchiefs or veils, not for style, but to keep hair from tangling in the wind or lice from spreading too easily. Hair itself is rarely cut with care, just hacked short or left to grow wild and tied back with twine. Jewelry for peasants, that means maybe a wooden cross, maybe a bit of tin shaped into a brooch. Gold belongs to nobles, silver to merchants. You have wood, bone, and hope. And if a string of beads comes into your hands, it is likely a rosary, meant for prayer, not for sparkle. Washing clothes is an ordeal. Water must be hauled, heated, mixed with ash or lye. The process stinks, burns hands, and rarely cleans fully. Clothes are beaten on stones, scrubbed until threads fray, hung where chickens peck at them. Sometimes you wear them damp, because waiting is not an option. And yet, for all this, fashion exists. Villages notice if a tunic is newly patched, if a cloak has a different shade of dye. A belt with a bronze buckle might cause whispers. A woman with ribbons in her hair might earn stares. Even in mud, humans find ways to display, to compare, to envy. The poorer you are, the more creative you become. Imagine stepping into your modern closet. Rows of shirts, stacks of jeans, jackets for different moods. Now strip it down to 2 wool tunics, 1 hood, a pair of cracked shoes, and a straw hat. Could you survive Peasant Fashion Week? Could you endure the itch, the damp, the stink? while keeping a straight face when someone jokes that your entire outfit looks like it crawled out of a compost heap. And yet peasants did endure. They wore their clothes thin, patched them with love and necessity, handed them down from parent to child. Each stitch was survival. Each thread was testimony. To them, it was not fashion. It was life. Entertainment is not part of your vocabulary as a medieval peasant. There are no books on your shelf, no glowing screens, no playlists or podcasts. When the day's work ends, there is only one great show in town, and it is always playing: the church. The church is the heart of your village, its bell the ticking clock of your life. It summons you in the morning, it marks your rest at night, it rings for births, for deaths, for marriages, for storms, for wars, and for reasons no one dares question. Its shadow stretches over every hut, every field, every mind. On Sundays, you gather in the cold stone building. The air is heavy with incense, thick smoke rising from swinging censers. Candles flicker against walls painted with saints whose eyes seem to follow you. The priest speaks in Latin, words you do not understand, but you kneel anyway, because kneeling is safer than standing. You cross yourself, you mutter the prayers you have memorized phonetically, and you wonder whether God listens to a voice that cannot pronounce his name. The Mass is long, slow, and repetitive, but it is also the only drama in your week. Here you hear stories of miracles and martyrs, of heaven's glory and hell's fire. The priest paints pictures more vivid than any tapestry: demons clawing at sinners, angels trumpeting the end of days. Children shiver, adults nod gravely, and everyone leaves reminded that life is short, sin is heavy, and salvation is never free. The church is not only spiritual, it is social. Festivals and feast days break the monotony of toil. On holy days, the square fills with music, dancing, games, and ale. You may eat meat, drink deep, laugh loud. The church permits joy, but only within its frame. Even your happiness must kneel before God. Confession is its own theater. Imagine whispering your sins through a wooden screen, knowing the man on the other side already suspects everything you have done. You admit you cursed when the plow broke, that you coveted your neighbor's goose, that you skipped work on a saint's day. He listens, he sighs, he assigns penance, prayers, fasting, maybe a small fine. You leave lighter, but also more tangled in the net. The priest knows your secrets now, and that knowledge is power. Tithes are the price of admission. 1/10 of your grain, your eggs, your geese. The poor give what they cannot spare, the church accepts, and the priest eats well. You joke that salvation is expensive, but the laugh is hollow. To refuse is to risk your soul, or worse, your place in the village. And yet, the church gives more than fear. It offers music, chants echoing in the rafters, hymns that lift you out of the mud for a moment. It offers color, stained glass catching the sun, banners waving at processions. It offers hope, the promise that suffering here earns reward elsewhere. For a peasant whose life is endless labor, that promise is intoxicating. Picture it as your medieval Netflix. The church provides weekly episodes of awe, terror, and ritual. It is the one theater, the one storyteller, the one screen. You cannot skip, you cannot pause, and the finale is always the same, a reminder that sin will drag you to hell unless you pay attention, confess, obey. So ask yourself, would you find comfort in these sermons, letting the incense and chants wash over you? Or would you feel trapped, knowing the only entertainment you had was fear and repetition? Would you kneel in faith, or would you peek around wondering what shows might be playing, if only another channel existed? If the church is the stage where your life plays out, superstition is the script whispered behind the curtains. It fills the cracks where faith and knowledge leave gaps, and for a medieval peasant those gaps are endless. You do not have science, you do not have medicine, you do not have explanations. What you have is rumor, ritual, and fear. A crow circles overhead at dusk, bad omen. A cow refuses to give milk, witchcraft. A child falls sick with fever, curse of the evil eye. You do not ask whether the well water is dirty or the grain spoiled. You look for the hand of the unseen, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Superstition lashes you like a whip. You walk home at night and flinch at the hoot of an owl. You toss salt over your shoulder, hang garlic in your doorway, tie knots in cords because someone swore it keeps demons away. You carve crosses into barn doors. You whisper charms under your breath. You sleep with an iron knife beneath your pillow to keep the fair folk from stealing your soul. The line between folklore and faith blurs. The priest condemns charms, yet blesses holy water. He denounces witches, yet sprinkles salt on the threshold. You nod, confused, but you follow every ritual anyway. Better to look foolish than to risk damnation. When plague or famine strikes, suspicion sharpens. Who angered God, who brought the curse? Eyes turn toward the widow with too many cats, the healer with too much knowledge of herbs, the foreigner who arrived just before the crops failed. Fear makes scapegoats, and scapegoats burn. Imagine the terror of being accused. Neighbors gather, voices rise. Someone mutters that you muttered in the fields, that you glanced at a cow before it went dry. Proof is unnecessary. The word witch is enough. You might be dragged to the square, bound, dunked in water to see if you float. If you sink, you were innocent, congratulations, but you drown. If you float, you are guilty, and the fire waits. And yet peasants cling to superstition not just from fear, but from need. In a world where hunger stalks and plague kills, you want to believe you can do something. Tie the ribbon, burn the herb, mutter the charm. At least it gives your hands purpose. At least it feels like action. There is humor, too, in the absurdity. A farmer swears by burying a dead toad in the field to ensure a good harvest. Another insists that putting bread under the pillow will cure toothache. You laugh, but you also wonder, what if it works? Better to try than not. In the silence of night, you might even whisper your own charm, just in case. Superstition weaves itself into daily rhythm. You won't cross paths with a black cat without spitting. You won't lend bread yeast on a Friday, lest your oven fail. You won't whistle indoors because spirits love a tune. To you, these are not silly, they are survival rules. Now imagine yourself in that world. The light flickers, the wind moans, the shadows stretch across the thatch. You hear a knock at the door, too soft to be human, too heavy to be wind. Do you reach for the iron knife beneath your straw bed? Do you pray louder? Or do you tell yourself, as modern reason insists, that it is nothing at all? Superstition is a whip, yes, but also a shield. It lashes, it restrains, it terrifies, but it also comforts, distracts, and guides. For the medieval peasant, it was impossible to live without it. And for you, in your warm bed tonight, the question lingers, would you have clung to charms and omens, or would you have dared to let go and face the darkness without a spell on your lips? Life as a medieval peasant is heavy, grinding, and short, but not without sparks of joy. They are rare, fleeting, fragile, yet when they come, they blaze like fire in the dark. Few moments shine brighter than weddings. Imagine the village square alive with color. For once, work halts. The fields are left untended, the plows rest, and even the Lord's men allow themselves a nod of approval. Two young peasants, promised since childhood or joined by arrangement, stand at the center. Their clothes may be patched, their shoes worn thin, but today ribbons are tied, flowers are braided, and faces are scrubbed clean for the occasion. The priest intones Latin words, and though most do not understand them, everyone knows what they mean. Hands are joined, vows exchanged, and suddenly the bleakness of life softens. There is hope in these vows, hope that even in the mud love can take root. For a moment, hunger and duty and sickness are pushed aside. Then comes the feast, if you can call it that. Neighbors bring what they can, a goose, a pot of stew, loaves of coarse bread. Ale flows, more than usual, and the air grows warm with laughter. Children chase each other, dogs dart between legs, fiddles squeak out melodies both clumsy and beautiful. The food is not rich, but it is shared, and that makes it taste better. Ale is the true star of the show. Brewed from barley or oats, weak enough that even children sip it, strong enough in quantity to blur the edges of misery. Cups clink, voices rise, and someone inevitably tells a joke about the priest's bald head or the miller's wife's sharp tongue. People laugh harder than the jokes deserve, because laughter is a gift too rare to waste. There are games too, wrestling matches, contests of strength, songs shouted into the night. A farmer might attempt a handstand and collapse in a heap, to the delight of children. Someone juggles apples until they drop and roll into the mud, and everyone cheers anyway. For once, failure is not shame but entertainment. Weddings are also business. Families negotiate dowries, lords approve unions, debts are settled. But for the peasants, what matters is the chance to forget. To eat until bellies are full, to drink until legs are unsteady, to dance until feet ache. To believe, if only for one night, that life can be sweet. And the morning after, heads pound, bodies groan, fields call. Work resumes, hunger returns, the wheel turns as always. but the memory of laughter lingers. Even in the hardest seasons, peasants recall the wedding feast, the taste of ale, the warmth of shared bread. It becomes a story retold by firelight, proof that they were not only beasts of burden, but also humans who could celebrate. Now picture yourself there. Would you raise your cup, sing loudly, and join the dance, even knowing tomorrow would be cruel again? Or would you stand aside, sober, watching others laugh and wondering how long the joy could last? Perhaps that is the lesson. Joy is not the absence of suffering, but the brief rebellion against it. For the medieval peasant, weddings and ale were not luxuries. They were survival. You picture childhood as a time of play, of schoolyards, of cartoons and birthdays. For a medieval peasant, childhood barely exists. It slips through the fingers almost as soon as life begins. A child is born not in a hospital with clean sheets, but in a hut filled with smoke and straw. The midwife mutters prayers, the mother cries out, neighbors wait anxiously outside. There is no guarantee of survival, not for the mother, not for the child. Many infants never see their first harvest. A cough, a fever, a shallow breath can end a life before it has even started. If the child survives, their world is work. By the age of 5 or 6, small hands carry water, gather firewood, scare crows from fields. By 7 or 8, they may help plow or herd animals. Childhood is not a season of innocence, but an apprenticeship in survival. There are no toys carved with care, sticks, stones, bits of cloth serve as playthings. And yet children still laugh. They chase each other in the mud, splash in puddles, sing nonsense songs, their joy sharp against the dullness of adult life. Education is rare. The priest might teach a handful of boys to chant Latin, but for most, letters are meaningless scratches. Knowledge is passed not in books but in backs bent over fields, in hands guiding other hands with sickles and spindles. Girls learn to spin wool, to knead dough, to mind siblings before they can write their own names. Boys learn to swing axes, to mend fences, to trap rabbits. And always death lurks near. Childhood diseases strike without mercy. A fever that would be cured with medicine today is a death sentence then. Teeth rot early, stomachs bloat from malnutrition, accidents claim lives in an instant. You see children buried with tiny wooden crosses, their names whispered once and then lost to silence. Families grieve, but life does not pause. The next day, the plow still turns the soil. Those who survive adolescence grow into adulthood fast. Girls may marry at 12 or 13, bearing children, while still children themselves. Boys may be called to labor in fields or war, before their voices deepen. The line between child and adult blurs. One day you are chasing geese, the next you are a husband, a wife, a parent. The average life expectancy hovers around 30 to 40 years. To modern ears, that sounds impossibly short. But it is not that everyone dropped dead at 40. It is that so many died young, dragging down the average. If you made it past childhood, if you avoided plague, famine, war, and childbirth, you might see 50 or 60. Few did. And yet, even in this brevity, life insists on joy. Children invent games, parents tell stories by firelight, lullabies echo in smoky huts. A child's giggle in the mud is a rebellion against statistics. A teenager's clumsy courtship is proof that even in hardship, humanity blooms. Now imagine yourself there. At age 12, would you be ready to plow a field, marry, or bury a sibling at age 20? Would you be ready to face the possibility that half your life was already behind you? Could you laugh, knowing tomorrow might be your last? Childhood was short. Life was shorter. And yet somehow peasants made room for both. Every year your life turns on a single gamble, the harvest. For the medieval peasant, the fields are not just land. They are life itself, the thin thread between survival and starvation. And that thread frays easily. Imagine standing in your field at midsummer. The stalks of barley rise, swaying with promise. You squint against the sun, praying for rain, but not too much. A storm could flatten the crop, drown the roots, rot the grain. Too little rain, and the stalks shrivel, the heads empty. You cannot control the sky, yet the sky controls you. The fear begins early, a low thrum in your chest. Every cloud, every breeze becomes a sign. You watch the horizon with the intensity of a gambler eyeing dice. Too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, any imbalance spells ruin. And ruin does not just mean lean months. It means hunger, famine, death. When harvest finally comes, the village moves like a single machine. Sickles flash, backs bend, children scurry to gather. Everyone works, because every hour counts. You sweat into the soil, hands blistering, knowing the clock is ticking. Winter is waiting just beyond the horizon, teeth bared. But fear does not vanish with full granaries. Grain must be stored, and storage is treacherous. Rats gnaw mold spreads, thieves lurk. A damp sack could mean sickness, a gnawed one hunger. You post children to guard the barn, you pray to saints, you patch holes with whatever you can. Still, you know loss will come. It always does. The memory of past famines never leaves. Old men tell stories of winters when people boiled nettles, when families gnawed bark, when the dead outnumbered the living. You laugh nervously, but your stomach knots. History is not a tale. It is a warning. Sometimes the harvest is good, even plentiful. Then comes another fear that your Lord will raise taxes, that raiders will come, that the church will claim more tithes. Prosperity is a beacon, drawing not comfort but danger. You learn not to boast, not to celebrate too loudly. Too much joy tempts envy from neighbors, from men with swords, from fate itself. In your bones, you carry the dread of winter. The shortening days, the lengthening nights, the chill that creeps through every crack. You count sacks, you ration bread, you measure time in dwindling piles. You tell children to eat less, to wait until spring. But children do not understand fear the way adults do. They cry, and their cries echo the gnawing inside you. Now imagine yourself in that world. You have worked all year, your back bent, your hands raw. You have gathered every stalk, every grain, and still, you lie awake wondering, will it be enough? What if the rats eat more than you expected? What if snow lasts longer this year? What if sickness spreads through your family before spring? The harvest is not just food. It is hope measured in handfuls, in baskets, in the weight of a sack on your shoulder. Too light and despair grows heavy. Too heavy and fear still lingers. Because in the medieval world, there is no winning gamble. Only survival bought one season at a time. So ask yourself, could you live with that kind of fear, circling you every year like a wolf around the fold? Could you gamble your life on the mercy of weather, pests, and fate? You thought your body belonged to the land, to the Lord, to the church. But sometimes it belongs to the sword. For a medieval peasant, war is not a choice. It is a summons, sudden and absolute. One day you are in the fields, bending over the plow. The next, a messenger arrives with orders. The Lord needs men. And men means you. You have no training, no armor, no shining sword. Perhaps a spear is thrust into your hand, its shaft rough, its tip dull. Perhaps you are given a padded gambeson, little more than cloth layered thick, already stained by another man's sweat. If you are unlucky, you march with nothing but a pitchfork, your faith and your fear. The march is long, muddy, endless. You leave your family behind, uncertain if you will ever see them again. Your wife hides tears behind her kerchief. Your children stare silently, too young to understand, too old not to worry. The village shrinks behind you, swallowed by horizon, while the clatter of boots and hooves surrounds you. War is chaos. Trumpets blare, banners whip in the wind, the smell of horses mingles with the stench of sweat and fear. You stand shoulder to shoulder with other peasants, eyes wide, knuckles white around your weapon. Across the field, another army mirrors yours. Peasants from another village, equally terrified, equally unwilling. The lords will clash, but it is the peasants who will bleed. The first charge is thunder. Hooves pound, arrows hiss, steel crashes against steel. You raise your weapon, heart hammering, and the world explodes in noise. You do not fight for glory. You fight for survival. Swing, thrust, duck, prey. The man who falls beside you could be a friend, a cousin, a neighbor. You do not have time to mourn. If you fall, your family receives nothing. No pension, no honor. You are buried in a ditch, or left where you lay. Your name fades, your children grow up without you, your wife remarries because she must. You died not for your land, but for your Lord's ambition, his quarrels, his pride. And yet, sometimes war feels inevitable. Lords feud, kings quarrel, borders blur. You are told you fight for God, for justice, for protection. Perhaps you even believe it, because believing makes the fear bearable. Still, when you look across the field, you see men just like you, poor, tired, terrified. And you wonder, why must peasants kill peasants so lords can argue over lines on a map? There are moments of strange comedy even here. A soldier forgets his helmet, another trips over his own spear. Men mutter jokes to mask their terror. If I die, at least I won't have to pay taxes. Laughter cracks the tension, brief but precious. It reminds you that even on the brink of death, humanity clings to humor. Imagine yourself now, modern and safe. Would you shoulder a spear for a cause you barely understand? Would you march miles on blistered feet, knowing your life could be spent for another man's glory? Or would you falter, hide, run, if running were even possible? For the medieval peasant, the draft was not a question. It was a sentence. And too often, that sentence ended in blood. If war and famine chain your body, faith and fear chain your soul. For the medieval peasant, belief is not a choice, it is the air you breathe. Every sunrise, every harvest, every illness, every death is framed in the language of God and sin. You kneel in the cold nave of the church, the priest's voice booming in Latin. You cannot understand the words, but you understand the pictures he paints. Hellfire, eternal torment, demons clawing sinners into pits of flame. He lifts a painted crucifix, and you feel the weight in your chest, not just of wood and iron, but of eternity itself. The fear is constant. You fear the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. But what is survival if not hunger? What is exhaustion if not sloth? What is anger when your child starves? Every natural impulse feels like a step toward damnation. Confession offers relief, but it is also a trap. You kneel, whisper sins through the screen. You cursed when the cow kicked the bucket. You coveted your neighbor's goose. You skipped work on a saint's day. The priest listens, frowns, assigns prayers or fasting, sometimes a fine. You leave feeling lighter, but also more entangled. He knows your secrets now. Secrets are power. Penance becomes routine. You fast when you are already hungry. Pray when you are already weary. Kneel when your knees are raw. The church teaches that suffering purifies, that the harder your life, the sweeter your reward in heaven. It is a message peasants cling to, because without it, despair would crush them. But faith is not all terror. It brings rhythm to your year, feast days, holy days, pilgrimages. Processions fill the square with color. Hymns rise like smoke into the rafters. You clutch relics, kiss icons, carry candles. For a brief moment you feel lifted, part of something vast, something eternal. The mud on your boots seems lighter when you believe it leads toward heaven. And yet doubt creeps in. You wonder why the priest eats better than you, why his robes are clean while yours rot, why he preaches humility while holding silver chalices. You bury these thoughts, for they are dangerous. Doubt itself feels like sin, a whisper from the devil. Still, the questions linger. Sometimes you laugh at the absurdity. A neighbor jokes, "If hell is fire, at least it will be warmer than winter." Another quips, "I will confess my sins tomorrow. Today I am too busy committing them." The humor is sharp, blasphemous, but it keeps despair at bay. Even fear, after all, can be mocked. Now picture yourself in that world. Would you carry the weight of faith gladly, kneeling, fasting, believing that heaven will balance the scales, or would you feel crushed, trapped in a bargain where every misstep risks eternal fire? Could you laugh, whispering dark jokes about hell, or would you tremble, clutching your rosary in the night? For the medieval peasant, faith was both anchor and chain, lifting them toward hope while pressing them down with fear. The two were inseparable, the whip and the blessing, the terror and the promise. When you imagine love, you picture roses, candlelit dinners, perhaps a romantic walk under the stars. For the medieval peasant, love blooms not in poetry but in mud. It is stitched together from duty, survival, and the occasional stolen glance. Marriage is rarely about choice. Families arrange unions to secure land, to combine tools, to ease debts. A father shakes another man's hand, and suddenly you are betrothed. Love may come later, or not at all. A girl of 12 or 13 may find herself a wife, her childhood traded for a dowry of chickens and a pig. A boy barely strong enough to wield a plow may wake one day to discover he must now also wield responsibility for a household. And yet affection sparks in unlikely places. Perhaps you labor side by side in the fields, exchanging jokes between furrows. Perhaps you share a mug of ale at a feast, laughter spilling freer than the drink. Perhaps you glimpse someone at Mass, their head bowed, and feel your own heart stumble. Romance exists, it simply fights harder for air. Homes are small, privacy scarce. Courtship means whispered words while carrying water, stolen moments behind barns, the brush of hands while gathering firewood. A shared smile in a life of toil is as precious as a jewel. You do not write sonnets. You carve initials into a tree, a secret only the two of you know. Of course, not all unions are happy. Some are loveless, forged in necessity. Tempers flare, fists fly, bitterness simmers. Infidelity is whispered about, sometimes punished harshly, sometimes ignored because survival matters more than virtue. A farmer might grumble that his neighbor spends more time mending fences with another man's wife than tending his own. The gossip flows as freely as ale. Still, there is tenderness. A husband offers the choicest bite of bread to his wife. A wife mends her husband's tunic with care, though her own sleeves fray. Parents watch their children sleep and for a moment forget the mud outside. Love shows itself not in grand gestures, but in endurance, in sacrifice, in shared laughter at life's absurdities. And yes, humor thrives here too. A wedding might be arranged, but jokes are endless. At least you will have someone to share the fleas with. Couples laugh because it is true. Fleas bite both. Mud clings to both. Hunger gnaws at both. Misery, when shared, becomes bearable. Now imagine yourself in that world. Could you love without privacy, without luxury, without choice? Could you build affection from scraps of time and whispered words? Would you rebel against an arranged marriage, or would you surrender to it, hoping affection might grow in muddy soil? For peasants, love was not a fairy tale. It was survival, companionship, a flicker of warmth in a cold hut. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was real, messy, imperfect, but no less powerful for that. Fear is the currency of the medieval village, and few fears are traded more often than the fear of witches. Disease strikes, crops fail, a cow drops dead, somewhere in the village someone whispers witchcraft. It begins with murmurs. The old widow with too many cats. The midwife whose herbs heal too well. The foreigner who arrived just before the rains stopped. Suspicion grows like mold, fed by hunger, fear, and envy. And once suspicion takes root, truth no longer matters. The priest thunders from the pulpit, witches consort with the devil, steal children, blight fields. He gestures toward scripture, toward burning candles, toward the crucifix overhead. And the people nod, because the alternative, that disaster is random, cruel, and meaningless, is harder to bear than believing a neighbor has cursed you. Accusation is a weapon sharper than any blade. Quarrel with someone, whisper witch. Envy her bread, suggest she bakes with demons. Angry at his stubborn ox, hint that a curse was cast. The village listens, the village gossips, the village judges. Fear spreads faster than plague. Trials are cruel parodies of justice. You may be dunked into a pond. If you sink, you are innocent, but drowned. If you float, you are guilty, and the fire waits. You may be pricked with needles, searching for a devil's mark. You may be forced to recite prayers without stumbling, as if nerves and fear prove guilt. The outcome is almost always the same. A pyre, smoke rising against the sky, the smell of charred flesh clinging to the village long after. Imagine standing in the crowd, the fire crackling, the accused screaming. Do you pity her? Do you fear her? Or do you force yourself to believe she deserved it, because otherwise the horror is unbearable? Not all take it so grimly. Dark humor flickers even here. Someone mutters, if she really had magic, would not she have cursed away her fleas? Another scoffs, if witches fly, maybe she can fly us out of this mud. Laughter breaks the tension, brittle but necessary. People laugh not because it is funny, but because the alternative is despair. But laughter dies quickly when suspicion turns your way. A sideways glance, a muttered word, a goat's illness, a child's fever. Suddenly you feel eyes on you. You sleep poorly, you cross yourself more often, you avoid drawing notice. In a world this fragile, anyone could be the next scapegoat. Now imagine yourself there. You live in a world where bad luck needs a culprit, and neighbors are desperate to find one. Could you survive the whispers? Could you keep your head down, swallow your doubts, and avoid standing out? Or would you one day hear your name hissed in the crowd, your fate sealed by fear and smoke? For the medieval peasant, witch hunts were not just stories. They were the terrifying proof that survival meant more than feeding your body. It meant silencing your voice, hiding your difference, and hoping that this week, suspicion burned someone else. When sickness struck a medieval peasant, you did not call a doctor. Doctors were for the rich, and even then their cures were questionable. For you, healing came from the village healer, the midwife, the barber with a knife, or your grandmother's whispered charm. Medicine was not science, it was desperation woven with faith, herbs, and a dash of fear. Imagine a fever. You are told to balance the humors, too much blood, too little phlegm. The barber sharpens his blade, ties a cloth around your arm, and lets the blood run into a bowl. The room spins, your skin pales, and everyone nods approvingly. The sickness is leaving. If you faint, that is considered a good sign. If you die, well, God must have willed it. Leeches are another favorite. Slick, fat, hungry, they are pressed to your skin until they swell with your blood. Children shriek, adults grit their teeth, and everyone hopes the leech knows what it is doing. In truth, it does not. But belief itself is part of the cure. Herbs fill the healer's hut. Garlic crushed into poultices, rosemary burned to cleanse the air, nettles brewed into teas. Some work, ginger can settle a stomach, willow bark dulls pain. Others are pure ritual, powdered bones, owl's feathers, dried toads. The line between medicine and magic blurs until no one cares to separate them. Charms are stitched into cloth, prayers knotted into ribbons. A mother ties red thread around a child's wrist to ward off the evil eye. A farmer buries a dead animal in the field to keep crops strong. The midwife mutters incantations while placing herbs under pillows. Science, no. But comfort, yes. Sometimes the cures are crueler than the illness. A toothache, burn it out with a hot iron. A headache, drill a small hole in the skull to release the demons. A limp, cauterize the wound with boiling oil. The smell of charred flesh mixes with prayer and the patient screams but survives sometimes. And yet, laughter flickers in the madness. A neighbor swears that wearing chicken dung on your chest will cure coughs. Another insists that kissing a donkey nose cures toothache. People joke, if it stinks enough, it must be working. Desperation makes even absurdity believable. What fascinates is how often they stumbled onto truths. Boiling water made it safer to drink. Honey soothed wounds and fought infection. Alcohol cleaned cuts better than mud. They did not know why, but sometimes blind tradition hit upon wisdom. Other times it was just blind. Now imagine yourself there. You wake with fever, shaking, sweating. A healer presses leeches to your arms. A priest sprinkles holy water on your forehead. Your grandmother ties a charm of nettles under your pillow. Would you submit, desperate for relief? Would you laugh at the absurdity? Or would you cling to hope, any hope at all? For the medieval peasant, remedies were less about curing disease and more about curing fear. To do something, anything, felt better than doing nothing. And sometimes, in the strange space between belief and reality, it even worked. If hunger gnaws year-round, winter sharpens its teeth. For the medieval peasant, winter is not just a season, it is an enemy, relentless and merciless. It does not care for prayers, for toil, for hope. It arrives with ice in its breath and lingers until bones ache and spirits falter. The signs begin in autumn. Days shorten, winds bite sharper, fields lie bare. You count sacks of grain, stack firewood, patch holes in the thatched roof. You pray it will be enough. It never feels like enough. When winter arrives, it strips the world of color. Fields vanish under snow, rivers freeze, forests grown with frost. Your hut becomes both refuge and prison. Smoke chokes the air, damp creeps into your bones, and every draft feels like a knife. Straw bedding turns stiff with cold, your breath hangs like a ghost in the air, and frost etches patterns on the inside of your walls. Food dwindles faster than you hoped. Bread shrinks thinner each week, stew stretches weaker, meat is a fading memory. You chew frozen turnips, gnaw on dried peas, boil broth so thin it tastes of nothing but survival. Children whimper at night, bellies hollow, and you hush them with stories, not food. Illness thrives. Coughs rattle, fevers burn, joints stiffen. The healer's herbs are gone, the priest mutters blessings, and still the sick pile blankets thin as paper. Some recover, many do not. Burials in frozen ground are shallow, hurried. The church bell tolls until it feels like part of the wind. Animals suffer too. Cows grow gaunt, chickens stop laying, pigs root hopelessly in frozen earth. Sometimes you make the cruel choice, slaughter an animal now to feed the family, or risk losing it later to starvation. Either way, it is loss. The cold itself is an adversary. To fetch water means breaking ice. To gather wood means stumbling through snowdrifts, hands numb, breath burning. Frostbite takes fingers, toes, ears. You learn to move even when weary, because to sit too long is to freeze. Sleep tempts with its false warmth, whispering promises you must resist. And yet, even in this bleakness, peasants find ways to endure. Families huddle close, bodies pressed together for warmth. Neighbors share a log, a bowl, a song. Stories are told by firelight, of saints, of heroes, of summers so bountiful they sound like fairy tales. Laughter still surfaces, dark, ironic. Someone jokes, at least fleas die in the cold, and the room erupts, because misery mocked is misery survived. Imagine yourself there. Outside snow howls, inside smoke stings your eyes. Your stomach is empty, your hands shake, your children cry softly. Would you endure, clinging to the hope of spring, or would the cold seep into your will, whispering that it would be easier to stop, to sleep, to let go? For the medieval peasant, winter was not simply endured, it was battled, day by day, night by endless night. And survival was not guaranteed. Not every moment of a peasant's life was toil, hunger, or fear. Even in the mud, people carved out sparks of joy. Music, stories, laughter, they were not luxuries, but necessities. Lifelines that reminded you that you were more than just a beast of burden. Picture the village on a feast day evening. Work is paused, the air smells of roasting bread and wood smoke, and someone pulls out a fiddle. The strings squeak, the tune is rough, but feet begin to tap anyway. Another villager brings a drum made from stretched animal hide. Hands clap, voices rise, and suddenly the square is alive. Songs are simple, often bawdy, sometimes absurd. Lyrics about geese that refuse to be plucked, about priests who snore too loudly in church, about lords who could not find their own fields without a servant to guide them. You laugh until your ribs ache, and for a few minutes the mud feels lighter. Stories are told too. Old tales of saints who tamed wolves, of dragons fought by heroes, of spirits haunting crossroads. Some tales warn, some inspire, some simply entertain. Around the fire, children's eyes widen, adults lean in, and even the weary forget their aches. In a world where tomorrow could bring famine or plague, stories offer escape. There are games played with stones, sticks, or dice carved from bone. Gambling too, though winnings are meager, a loaf of bread, a mug of ale. Shouts and laughter ring out when someone loses spectacularly. You have got worse luck than the miller's donkey, someone jeers, and the whole circle roars. Ale fuels much of this joy. Weak enough to drink all day, strong enough in quantity to blur misery. Cups are passed, cheeks flush, voices grow louder. A man attempts to dance, stumbles, and lands in the mud to cheers. A woman belts out a song so off-key that even the priest chuckles. For once, mistakes are not punished, they are celebrated. And in the quiet moments, joy is smaller, softer. A child humming while weaving straw. A mother telling riddles as she spins wool. Friends exchanging jokes while sharpening tools. Laughter hidden in chores, like wildflowers in the cracks of stone. Imagine yourself there. No television, no radio, no streaming services. Only voices, hands, firelight. Would you find joy in a clumsy fiddle tune, in a joke about the Lord's crooked teeth, in a bedtime story whispered beside smoky straw? Could you laugh, knowing tomorrow you would return to the fields? For the medieval peasant, joy was not escape from suffering, it was woven through it. Music, stories, and laughter did not erase hunger or fear, but they gave strength to endure them. And that perhaps is why such small joys felt so large. For most peasants, lords and nobles are distant figures, names muttered with resentment, blessings asked from afar. But sometimes their presence descends like a shadow across your path, and an encounter with nobility can change your life or end it. Picture a procession on the village road. Hooves thunder, banners snap, and suddenly your muddy world is pierced by silk and steel. Knights gleam in polished armor, their lances bright in the sun. Ladies ride beneath velvet canopies, jewels winking like fire. The sight is dazzling, alien, almost divine. For a moment, you feel as if gods have walked among mortals. But awe quickly shifts to fear. The road must be cleared, peasants shoved aside. Fail to bow deeply enough, and you risk a beating. Look too long at a noblewoman, and whispers of insolence may seal your fate. Your body belongs to your lord, but so does your posture, your eyes, your silence. If fortune twists, you may be summoned to the manor. Perhaps to deliver grain, perhaps for labor, perhaps for punishment. You step into halls lined with tapestries richer than anything you own, floors strewn with rushes scented with herbs. Servants bustle, dogs bark, and at the head of the room sits the lord, well-fed, well-dressed, his hand heavy with rings. He looks at you as one might look at a tool, useful only as long as it functions. Sometimes the encounters are cruel. A noble demands extra taxes because his coffers run low. A knight takes your best pig to feed his company. Soldiers tramp through fields, trampling crops, laughing at your protests. You swallow rage because rage is dangerous. One word too bold, and you might swing from a rope. And yet, sometimes, encounters tilt the other way. A lord might pardon a debt, grant a small favor, or protect a widow. A lady might smile kindly, hand alms to a starving child, or intercede when punishment grows too harsh. Such moments become village legends, retold for years, proof that not all nobles are wolves. Hope survives on such scraps. For peasants, nobility are both distant stars and immediate storms. You envy their wealth, you resent their power, but you cannot deny their presence. They eat what you cannot imagine, wear what you cannot afford, live in halls you will never enter freely. And still, your life depends on their whims. Dark humor creeps in here, too. A farmer jokes, "If the Lord's belly gets any bigger, we will have to plant more fields just for him." Another mutters, "His horse eats better than I do." The laughter is risky, whispered in barns, but laughter is its own rebellion. Now imagine yourself there. You stand by the roadside as a glittering procession passes. Do you bow, eyes lowered, heart pounding? Do you peek up, daring a glance at the jewels, the armor, the silk? Or do you clench your fists in the mud, dreaming of a world where power is not decided by birth? For the medieval peasant, encounters with nobility were glimpses of another universe, one close enough to touch, yet forever out of reach. A universe that could bless, curse, or crush you in the blink of an eye. You might think of justice as scales balanced, as fairness measured out with reason. For a medieval peasant, justice is neither scale nor balance. It is a club, heavy and one-sided, swinging always downward. The law belongs to the powerful. Your lord is judge, jury, and often executioner. He owns the land, courts, and the gallows. If you steal a loaf of bread, you may lose a hand. If you poach a rabbit from the Lord's forest, you may swing from a tree. If the Lord himself takes your pig or your daughter's labor, there is no law to stop him. Trials are not about truth, but about spectacle. You may be forced into trial by ordeal. Plunge your hand into boiling water, carry hot iron across the yard, or be tossed into a river bound. If your wounds heal clean, if you sink rather than float, you are innocent. If not, well, the devil helped you, and punishment is swift. Fines crush peasants. A small infraction, missing church, quarreling in the square, grazing a cow on the wrong patch of land, may cost more than a family earns in weeks. Fail to pay, and you face beatings or worse. The Lord's coffers grow fat, while your belly grows empty. The church adds its own justice. Blasphemy, heresy, witchcraft, all judged in smoky chambers, with priests muttering Latin over terrified villagers. Confession might save your soul, but not your body. The whip, the stocks, or exile may follow. The sight of a neighbor locked in wooden stocks, mocked and pelted with rotten food, is both entertainment and warning. There is dark humor even here. Villagers mutter, "The Lord calls it justice when he wins, and mercy when he loses." Or, best to confess quickly. The priest already knows your sins better than you. The jokes sting because they are true. Justice favors the rich. A noble who kills may pay a fine. A peasant who steals may lose his life. Bloodlines and gold tilt the scales. You know this, everyone knows this, but speaking it aloud is dangerous. Silence is survival. Now imagine yourself in that world. A neighbor accuses you of stealing grain. You stand in the square, eyes on you, Lord on his dais. You know you did not steal, but does that matter? Would you thrust your hand into boiling water, trusting God to protect you, or would you pray for luck, knowing luck rarely favors peasants? For the medieval peasant, justice was not blind. It stared straight at you, saw mud on your boots, and judged you guilty before you opened your mouth. Justice was a joke, but no one laughed too loudly. For you, death may feel like a distant horizon, something for old age. For the medieval peasant, death is not distant. It is a neighbor, a shadow, a constant guest at the hearth. From the moment you are born, the odds are against you. Many infants never take more than a few breaths. Mothers bleed, babies fail to thrive, fevers strike without mercy. If you live past childhood, you have already defeated staggering chances. But victory is never final. Every season brings risk. Winter starves, spring floods, summer plagues, autumn harvest accidents. A cut from a sickle festers, a tooth abscess poisons the blood, a cough turns into a grave. There are no antibiotics, no surgeries, no hospitals, only herbs, prayers, and luck. Death does not wait for old age. A man may collapse in the field at 30. A woman may die giving birth at 16. A child may vanish from fever overnight. The village buries them quickly, with simple wooden crosses or unmarked mounds. Bells toll until their sound feels as natural as birdsong. And yet, death is not always feared. It is expected, woven into the rhythm of life. You attend funerals as often as weddings. You see bodies laid out on boards, candles flickering at their sides. You whisper prayers for their souls, and you wonder when your turn will come. Not if when. The church teaches that death is a doorway, that suffering here leads to reward beyond. This belief softens the blow, gives peasants strength to bear the endless toll. But fear lingers. What if you sin too much? What if purgatory burns forever? What if hell waits? You kneel harder, pray longer, hoping faith can tip the scale. There is dark humor even in this. Villagers mutter, "At least in death, we finally get a day off." Another jokes, "The grave is the only bed without fleas." People laugh, because laughter makes the inevitable less crushing. Death also shapes how peasants live. They marry young, work hard, have children quickly, not because they dream of the future, but because they know the future may not wait. Life is short, so it must be filled, even if filled with labor and hunger. Now imagine yourself there. You wake each day knowing death could visit before nightfall. Would you live more fiercely, cherishing every laugh, every bite of bread, every spark of fire, or would you live in dread, paralyzed by the certainty of the end? For the medieval peasant, death was not an interruption of life. It was part of life, always near, always watching, always waiting. When you trace the hardships of the medieval peasant, hunger, war, plague, cold, injustice, you may find yourself asking, why go on? Why endure a life so hard, so short, so heavy? For the peasant, survival itself was both the burden and the answer. The instinct to live is stubborn. Even when bellies growl and fields fail, even when coffins outnumber cradles, something drives you forward. Perhaps it is habit. You wake, you work, you sleep, you wake again. Life continues because stopping feels unthinkable. But survival is not only instinct, it is also tether. You live for your children, for your family, for your neighbors who rely on you. If you die, your wife carries the burden alone, your children starve, your fields rot. Your life is not your own. It belongs to those around you. Faith is another anchor. The church preaches that suffering purifies, that endurance here buys paradise later. Whether you believe or simply hope, the promise is enough to keep hands moving, feet walking, prayers whispered. If not heaven, then at least meaning. There is also joy, however small. A wedding feast, a child's giggle, a warm loaf pulled from the oven. A song sung badly but with heart. A story told by firelight that makes even the weary smile. These sparks, fragile as they are, prove life is more than survival. They are the reason survival matters. Humor plays its part too. You laugh at fleas, at the Lord's belly, at your own misery. Joking about hardship does not erase it, but it transforms it into something you can endure. As long as laughter echoes in the village, despair does not win. Community binds survival. Alone, you falter. Together, you endure. Neighbors share bread, guard fields, raise roofs, mourn losses. When famine hits, the strong carry the weak, knowing that one day the roles may reverse. Survival is not individual. It is collective. Now imagine yourself there. Your life is hard, your future uncertain, your death inevitable. Would you endure out of duty, out of faith, out of love, or out of sheer defiance? Would you cling to laughter in the mud, to bread shared at a feast, to a whispered story at night, or would you question whether survival is worth the cost? For the medieval peasant, the answer was always the same: survive. Not because life was easy, but because even in mud and misery, life was still life. And life, however fragile, was worth clinging to. Now that you have walked through the mud, the hunger, the cold, the fear, ask yourself what remains, what echoes still linger from the lives of medieval peasants long buried beneath fields and stone. Their world was harsh, unforgiving, brief, yet it shaped the foundation of ours. The peasants who bent their backs to the plow fed the castles, the towns, the armies. Without them, kingdoms would have starved. They built not monuments but survival, and survival became the soil from which history grew. You carry their echoes, even now. In the bread you eat, once ground by hand on stone. In the rhythms of weeks shaped by church bells and feast days. In superstitions whispered jokingly, throwing salt over your shoulder, knocking on wood. Tiny fragments of their fears and hopes still cling to you, centuries later. But the echo is not just cultural, it is human. Their laughter in mud, their whispered prayers, their stubborn will to live against impossible odds. These are not relics. They are the heartbeat of humanity, repeating across ages. You know hunger, they knew it sharper. You know fear, they lived beside it. You know love, so did they, in moments stolen from hardship. The lesson is not that peasants lived in misery, and we are lucky. The lesson is that even in misery, they found ways to be human. To joke, to dance, to tell stories, to endure. They remind you that life is never just suffering. It is always somehow survival plus something more. Imagine them now, looking at you. You with warm clothes, full stomach, light at the flick of a switch. They would marvel, envy, perhaps laugh. But they might also ask, do you value it? Do you treasure comfort the way they treasured a crust of bread, a mug of ale, a song by firelight? Perhaps that is the true echo, a reminder to notice. To see your comforts not as rights but as miracles. To honor their struggle by not wasting what you have. To live not just easily, but fully. So when you lie in bed tonight, warm, safe, fed, remember the peasants who lay on straw, listening to wine through the cracks, praying the granary would last, hoping death would pass them by another day. Their echoes reach you still, if you are willing to listen. And now, before we close this journey, if you found yourself immersed in this story, take a moment to like this video, share where you are listening from, and subscribe for more journeys into the strange, the forgotten, the human past. Tell me in the comments what struck you most about peasant life, and what topic would you like us to explore next. Thank you for walking with me through the mud and shadows of history. May your night be warmer, your bread be thicker, and your laughter be louder than theirs ever could.